The reprehensible acts yesterday were incited by the President of the United States. Yesterday's events would not have happened without him. If there were no President Trump, this would not have happened, plain and simple. The fish stinks from the head. So I believe the President is dangerous and should not hold office one day longer.
I joined the Senate Democratic leader in calling on the Vice President to remove this President by immediately invoking the 25th Amendment. If the Vice President and Cabinet do not act, the Congress may be prepared to move forward with impeachment. That is the overwhelming sentiment of my caucus.
That was both Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi pushing hard for the removal of President Trump. Now, he's got 9 days left in his administration. In fact, though, today, as Lindsay pointed out at the beginning, House Democrats introduced articles of impeachment charging the president with the incitement of insurrection. Harvard Law School professor and famed constitutional law expert Alan Dershowitz joins us now to break this all down. Professor, welcome back. This is so crucial for you to weigh in on and explain to us what's really going on. So let me jump real quick in. Let's start with impeachment before we get to the free speech part of this. The House is voting a second time. Many in the House, especially on the Democrats, are saying to keep him from running from office or doing it. Explain what's happening here and why this is important.
Well, it's unconstitutional to impeach a president when you can't put him on trial while he's still the president. The jurisdiction of Congress to try a president or anybody else is limited to somebody who is sitting in office. It says the president, vice president shall be removed from office on impeachment. So if he's already out of office, he cannot be tried. You can't impeach him just in order to try to stop him from running. If they could impeach you, Sean. They can impeach you. Both of us, we could run for president in 2024. I don't know about you, but I'm over 35 and born in this country. And could they hold me in front of the Senate and say, we're impeaching you solely to make sure you don't run in 2024? It's an absurd, ridiculous, unconstitutional argument.
I'm glad you said that. And just for the record, I'm just above 35.
But, you know, the interesting thing is, Professor Dershowitz, you mentioned Senator McConnell saying that session's not going into the 19th. Let's say that the House does pass this, they likely will. Can they get this done in one day? What does that even look like? Because that is just hours before Biden takes presidency. Can they get it done in one day?
Not in compliance with due process. Due process requires an opportunity to put on a defense, an opportunity to challenge the prosecution's evidence. I know I was on the floor of the Senate challenging the last impeachment and successfully challenging the last impeachment. You can't have a trial in 4 or 5 hours. In any event, even under the McConnell schedule, you probably don't get to even debate these issues until 1 o'clock in the afternoon on the 20th, when President Trump becomes Mr. Trump and has the same status legally as any of us on this show do.
Before I leave this subject real quick, and if this were to happen, if they did what they say, the House passes it and then they wait till he's after, so would that be an issue that the Supreme Court would have to weigh in on and say, no, you can't do this?
Well, nobody knows that the Supreme Court would weigh in. I would hope they would. That would be such a clear violation. In theory, of course, they would have jurisdiction to do it. It would also not only violate the impeachment clause, but the First Amendment, the speech that he made, which allegedly is the ground for impeachment, is completely protected by the Constitution. It's the kind of speech hundreds of people have made, labor leaders, suffragettes, radicals, civil rights leaders. Go to the Capitol, show your strength. You know, it's the right to petition government for a redress of grievances. To turn that into an impeachable offense is to turn the Constitution on its head.
Right. All right. Well, let's pivot then, if we can. I want to get to this whole free speech and Twitter issue that's happening. So somebody brought this up this weekend, and I want to get your take on it, because there was a case of a bakery in Colorado. And if you recall, they wouldn't bake a cake for a gay couple. Now, this was largely on religious rights, but I want to see if there's an analysis here. The bakery literally said that they had a First Amendment right to refuse service. And the people on the left went nuts and said, if you're a public business, you can't just refuse service to anyone, right? That's generally what they said. Now the left is saying that Twitter and these other private platforms, well, they can choose who they want to serve and therefore ban Trump. Now, am I making a stretch here, or is that a hypocritical stance for folks on the left?
Well, I think it's morally hypocritical, of course. Legally, there's a difference because there are anti-discrimination statutes that prohibit discrimination based on sexual orientation, gender, etc. So you can't refuse to bake a cake unless you have a religious right to do that on the ground that somebody is a woman or black or Jewish or gay or whatever. And that's different from what Twitter is doing. But Twitter still has a problem because it is exempt under Section 230 from all kinds of lawsuits. And when you get that exemption, the deal is you can't censor. You're not you're not Newsmax. You are just a platform. Newsmax decides to have me on, not to have somebody else on. And if I say something nasty, you can shut me down, and you have no exemption. You can be sued. On the other hand, they do have an exemption, and they can't have it both ways. So I think in this decade, we're going to see legislation and judicial opinions that rein in a little bit. They do have a First Amendment right, and we don't want to take that away. We don't want to give the government control over social media. But when you become so giant, there are antitrust implications and there are Section 230 implications. So it's a complicated, difficult issue.
Okay.
Yeah, it is a complicated issue. You know, and Twitter and all these social media, they are private companies. And a lot of people say that out there. I think the interesting thing in Twitter's case is they cite future concerns. So this hasn't even happened yet. They're going against their own terms that you can kick someone off of something they haven't even done yet because if you think what they might do.
So there's a response to it. And I have my own podcast. It's called The Dirt Show, and I now have it on Rumble. Why do I have it on Rumble? Because Rumble doesn't take it down. They don't censor. So we can compete in the marketplace of ideas and have two kinds of media platforms. And what do you want?
But Professor, hold on. In the case of Parler, the Amazon Web Services took it down. So
and
that's
they're being sued.
Right. And so tell me where you go from there, because that's always been the argument. You don't like Twitter? Leave Twitter. Well, everyone did. And then what happened? They said, well, now that we're going to take you out of our app store. Okay, when that didn't work and people started still going to Parler, they said, let's get Amazon to delist you so you can't even host it. Go from there, sir.
Well, there are real antitrust implications when you have that kind of an approach. And, you know, on one of my shows, I had Joel Pollack on, who deliberately and willfully violated the standards of YouTube. He said he thought the election was unfair. And I challenged YouTube to take it down. And I said, if you do, I will sue you under Section 230. They didn't take it down. So I think we have to begin to fight back, both in the court of and antitrust and legally.
You know, real quick before we let you go, because we're almost out of time, the media keeps, including Willie Geist, keeps saying that this isn't a free speech issue at all. This is 230 or whatever you want to make. Is that true? Is it?
Of course it's a free speech issue. It may not be a First Amendment issue directly, but the First Amendment has a culture and a First Amendment approach. We in this country believe in the marketplace of ideas. If you don't like an idea, you don't suppress it. You respond to it. And that's what we ought to be doing, opening up the marketplace of ideas, not shutting it down.
You know, one of the things that I've always admired about you, Professor, is that you're there to defend free speech. You're not there to pick a side. And that's what we need more of right now, is that if we don't start defending what we don't like, we aren't going to like what we become very shortly. And you've always been very principled that it's not about what Alan Dershowitz believes, it's about what the Constitution supports.
Most things go against my belief. President Trump's speech went against my belief. Much of what he did on immigration went against my belief. But I absolutely believe in neutral principles of Constitution analysis and the shoe on the other foot test. How would you react if the shoe were on the other foot? Yeah. And if there were conservative media banning liberals, that's the way I look at these issues.
And I'm glad you do. I'm glad you do. And I agree that we need to fight back more. Professor, thank you for enlightening us. I look forward to having you back soon because Lord knows we're going to need more of this soon.
Thank you.
All right. Coming up, more on big tech censorship of conservatives. What does the future look like for social media? Steve Krakauer, he's going to weigh in next. Stay with us.
There's Newsmax. You like Newsmax. I like it too.
Watch Newsmax TV, America's fastest growing news channel.
Newsmax. You like Newsmax. I like it too.
Download the Newsmax app from your smartphone. Watch Newsmax